A very good afternoon to all of you. Hope you're having a wonderful time at the Confluence this year. A very warm welcome to my esteemed panelists, Sahana, Vinutha, Sam, and Jay. So the topic for today's discussion is reimagining the talent stack for the next gen workforce. So with the rapid adoption of technology and integration of Gen AI into different business processes, the traditional talent stack has undergone a seismic shift. If you look at the average half-life of skills today, it is close to 5 years. In fact, for IT and technology skills, it is as low as 2.5 years. This reflects the very transient nature of skills today. As per the World Economic Forum, 50% of the employee population will require upskilling and reskilling by 2030 to match the changing nature of jobs. Let us hear from our panel of experts today how exactly organizations are preparing for the inevitable future of human-AI alliance. So my first question goes to Sahana. So how do you envision the new age talent stack to look like? Should the focus be on developing specialists or encouraging generalists who are fungible across roles?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. Hi, everyone. So in terms of, the question of is it specialist or are we looking at generalist, right? It all boils down in terms of adaptability and also, in the end of the day, what do we need from a business perspective or a customer's perspective? Are you able to deliver is the first question. Do you have a deep understanding of the technology? And the second is how adaptable are you in terms of delivery, right? So these two becomes a priority that we are looking at. So I would say both are equally important, be it specialist or generalist that we are talking out here. The priority out here boils down to the customer needs. That would be the first focus. To give you an example out here, most of the organizations here are going through a digital transformation. And if you are going through a digital transformation journey, there's one shot where you get in average engineers, right? But let's look at the other side of it. Let's say you focus in terms of hiring top talent. And when the focus is in terms of top talent, what has been seen out in the industry is in terms of your investment savings, it is a double digit because as soon as you hire top talent, the productivity or efficiency increases by 20 to 30% in terms of your entire transformation journey. Now, we are speaking of multidisciplinary agile teams. So a good mix of this, both is equally important. What plays a key role out here, though, is from a culture perspective, if you look at it, it's not that one individual will win, right? It's a team that, since we are speaking of multidisciplinary teams, it is a team that wins in the end of the day. So the more important question is, while you hire these skill sets, are you hiring folks who are more adaptable within the organization, who are more collaborative, who take the team to success versus, just being SMEs or generalists? I think the crux would go in terms of how you deliver, and the crux also happens to be the customer needs.
Got it. So specialists, generalists, they need to be adaptable to bring out the maximum benefit. So my next question is to Jay. What are the top 3 non-negotiable skills which you think that the new age talent stack should have?
Hello, thank you. Thank you for having me here. And thank you for everyone staying for the post-lunch session, especially competing with an AI session, isn't it? Thankfully, you came to the human session because humans will survive longer than AI, that I'm pretty sure, okay? So to go back to your question and also to what Sahana said, I think as the world evolves, there will always be need for specialism. There'll be need for deep expertise. But I think the focus on generalism will become more and more because you want to have Gen AI or machine learning or all the technology tools will give us the specific knowledge you need, but how the knowledge gets implemented to solve a problem is where the human skill becomes more important, isn't it? That's why generalist probably is the way the world will go. So with that frame in mind, I think the top 3 skills, I'm not going to say Hadoop, Ruby on Rails and all of that. If you're hoping to hear that, sorry, I'm going to disappoint you. But I think the 3 skills which I think will be very important, and at BT, what we are really focused on, knowing very well that the digital transformation is going to change the way the company and the telco industry is going to operate, are problem solving. When I say problem solving, it's about creatively looking at problems, trying to connect disparate things which are going around, and then how do you deliver a solution which meets the need of the customer. So creative problem solving is the first non-negotiable skill. The second non-negotiable skill, I'm going to steal that from Sahana, is collaboration. Because today, I don't think an individual who is a high performer is going to really take the company to the next level. It's a group of people who can work together who will take the company to the next level. So collaboration is extremely important. And in a globalized world, that's not always easy, isn't it? And machines don't do that really well. It's the human beings who will have to kind of take 2 steps forward and 2 steps backward to develop that collaboration muscle. So that's very, very important. And the last one is learning agility. She used the word half-life and said the skills keep getting redundant quite quickly. And as individuals and as organizations, how well do we evolve and try to better our capabilities on a regular basis is very, very important. This is probably the best time for survival of the fittest, but I think it's survival of the person who learns the quickest, isn't it? Is what will happen in the next few years.
So Jay spoke about collaboration, learning agility, and definitely the problem-solving mindset. So Vinutha, if you have any other skills on the top of your mind which you think would be critical apart from the ones Jay mentioned.
For me, I think they're completely different. So I'm not looking at, I'm looking at talent as a whole.
Yeah.
So I think for me, what is most critical would be creativity. And also critical thinking and continuous learning. Because if you look at today, we have to balance a lot of short-term realities and long-term goals, right? And in the age of so much of information at our hand, how do you use that information? Not by doing, by evaluating it in the right way, by interpreting it in the right way, and from that, driving, sound judgments. I think that becomes very important. And of course, he touched upon, the skills getting redundant very soon. So I think continuous learning is something that is very, very important, because it's not like the olden days where skills were relevant for 30 years.
Yeah.
Today, it's almost like 2 years you have to learn new skills, right?
Yeah.
So that I think is very important. But having said that, I think, of course, it is primary responsibility of the individuals who have to do that. But I think they need a lot of support from the academia itself. When in the colleges, the courses have to be designed and help them, equip them with this kind of mindset and skills. Once they come into the organizations, again, the company should provide that kind of an environment where they're experimenting, where they're practicing, they're learning, keeping actually time aside to learn, and also moving out of the comfort zone and, networking with people, getting an outside perspective, getting to understand what is happening in the external environment, I think are very, very important.
Right.
Yeah.
So you talked about learnability and definitely critical thinking. So my next question is to Sam. What approaches are you employing as an organization to ensure that this sought-after skills are inculcated in the organization? And how are you promoting that culture of lifelong learning? If you can just give us 1 or 2 best practices that you have seen in your organization or elsewhere. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. So we talk around skills quite a lot, and you've heard that term probably almost as much as AI, I think, this afternoon, which has been quite good. I think the problem that we have is we talk about skills a lot, but not everyone knows, completely what we mean by skills. So one of the things that I did when I joined PayPal is, just as an example, is we know how many data scientists we have. Most organizations do, because they have a job title, data scientist, or they sit in a job family, data science. But that's not all your population that can do data science. So The first thing I did is I took that list and then I looked at our entire, or close to our entire organization, and looked at the skills that make up a data scientist. And actually that population was double the job titles and the job families. And that's a very, very quick ROI to say, well, if you want to go and expand your data science workforce, you don't have to go and recruit and kind of, go and find these people and bring them on board and train them and develop them straight away. You've got them here. You just can't identify them until you really understand skills. So that's a big, big factor that's involved. And think about learning and development. Yeah. A lot of learning and HR organizations haven't had access to great data to be able to be effective. If you think about your learning organization, they may point you to another company they work with or kind of a portal where you've got 10,000 courses to go and have a look at. But not every individual in an organization knows, I want to go and be this role. And these are the courses that I need to complete to upskill myself. But once you look at skills at a granular level and you start to look at your employees based on skills, you can make these suggestions and be proactive. So rather than here's 10,000 online courses, which one would you like to do? It can be you've got 80% of the skills towards being a data scientist. And here's the training and learning path that you can get to gain those additional skills. Do you want to do that? And that becomes highly effective. And that's where a lot of companies have missed out, because talent acquisition teams are great at doing that. Talent acquisition teams in your organization, other organizations, are great at looking at LinkedIn profiles, GitHub, Stack Overflow profiles, seeing your employees' skills and offering them that next step. So we need to be better at doing that internally in organizations. We should be able to offer people the next step and the right career program better than competitive talent acquisition teams should be able to. So I think that's the big element. And if you haven't heard it all already, I think the kind of catchphrase that will start going through HR a little bit is talent density. How much skill do you have? How effective and impactful are your employees? Historically, we've looked at volume of talent as an indicator of business health. How's your business doing? Oh, it's great. We've hired 10,000 people this year. It doesn't mean you've got a great business. And then when you think about talent density and skills and what's your skill proliferation and development within your workforce, that's the ROI metric that really matters and that people start to focus on now.
Yeah. So talent density becoming a critical ROI, talent ROI for the organization. So we talked a lot about soft skills. So I want to understand from Sahana, do you anticipate a shift in the traditional, ideal mix for candidates today, employees today, which is currently focused on perhaps 85% hard skills and 15% soft skills? Do you think the tables will turn?
I think I guess yes. The tables will turn. And in fact, we do see that shift in most of our organizations, right? Let me give you an example out here. Now, one of the previous organizations I worked for, the company was going through a transformation journey. And as part of the transformation, the key was, yes, we need to get into squads and tribes, etc. That is one part of the problem. But the second part of the problem is we need to go through a cultural transformation too. We need to go through teams should be able to communicate with each other, collaborate with each other, etc. Now, let's look at the scenario now post-COVID. If you look at it in a hybrid working scenario, I think the way forward would be roles would be location agnostic. At London Stock Exchange, if you notice, we do have a lot of global roles based out of Bangalore. So to answer your question in terms of will there be a shift, there's definitely a shift, because if you are working globally in globally distributed teams, communication plays a key role. And when we're speaking about soft skills, right, it's not necessarily just communication. It's in terms of your emotional intelligence and to what Jay mentioned about in terms of creative thinking, right? Technology is moving fast. And most of the things are getting automated. While that is being automated, our talent is going to excel only if there is critical thinking, there's problem solving, design thinking. These are the skills that become more important. So I think the ratio would shift somewhere around to 60-40. Okay. In a hybrid environment.
So 60 being soft skills, right?
No, 60 being technical? 40 being
okay.
The soft skills.
So the shift will be not an abrupt one, but a slight change.
Fair enough.
Got it. So, Vinutha, the next question is to you. In your opinion, which era are we transitioning into? Is it machines assisting humans or humans assisting machines? And how do you balance leveraging AI for efficiency while preserving the human creativity in your talent-related decisions?
Yeah, I'm going to go with machines assisting humans for now,
right.
but it's happening very fast anyway. So there's a very dystopian view and there's a utopian view to it. Hoping that the AI singularity is far. So for now, I will go with the very, very skills which really cannot be replicated by machines, right? I mean, coming to your emotional intelligence or, creativity. I'll give you an example of creativity. For example, if you ask a machine, if you load the machine with the recipes to cook, right, it would kind of belt out those dishes. But the chef, a person who's been cooking all his life, can experiment because he draws a lot of inspiration from his experience and he would play around with the flavors and ingredients, etc. And he will dish out a perfect recipe.
Right.
So that is not possible for a machine. Coming to critical thinking again, which I mentioned before, I think we have the capability to basically interpret and evaluate and analyze data and derive judgments out of it. If you ask AI to do some critical thinking, it knows it has to crunch some data and give out some output, but it doesn't know why it is doing it, right? And many, I was reading some articles after you told me this is the topic. So apparently AI doesn't know to say that I don't know. Right? So it looks at all the information it has and it just gives you the best guess.
Yeah.
So how do you trust that? Right? So these are various things. I think even the gut feel that we have as human beings.
Yeah.
And that's not possible with a machine. Right? Understanding cultures, traditions. Why do we do things in certain ways?
Yeah.
That is not possible, at least for now, with the machine. So I think still the edges with the humans. But I don't know, somebody was telling me 2030 is when, you were mentioning something, right? But according to some articles that I've read, it says 2030, we're going to be half machines. So don't know where we're going, but it's happening fast. I think acceptance is the key. Yeah.
So intuition will continue to be the key differentiator between a human and a machine. Yeah. So Sam, the next question is to you. Do you think the widespread adoption of AI will lead to job displacement or job transformation? What impact will it have on the conventional organization structure?
Yeah, I think definitely both. In many different ways.
Okay.
When we talk about AI disruption in a workforce, there is a tendency to talk about the software developers, the marketing people, the creative people, the sales people. I'd like to offer a bit of a different view. And I really liked Parry and Shashank's conversation earlier. If you caught that, it was fantastic. But explore the impact on a leadership team, so CEOs, board members. If you think about those individuals, overwhelmingly, it's changing a little bit, but overwhelmingly they are accountants, they've come from finance, because investors trust them to make sound decisions based on predominantly financial data, but also business data. They have that trust. Now, if you think about AI, what's it great at? Looking at all the data, making decisions. A CEO or a board member can only see so much data. I think if I sent out my CEO an Excel file with 10,000 rows and 10,000 columns, I probably wouldn't be in my job too long. It's always put it on one slide on PowerPoint, in organizations. Leaders love one slide, just give me the overview. So AI is very good at doing that. And I think there'll be an opportunity in the future. And in fact, I think 2 to 3 years, we'll probably see pressure from investors to board members, to leadership teams around what was the AI involvement in the decisions that you are making. And there'll be a need to do that because individuals have bias, they'll look at certain data in different ways, but also, a lot of leadership teams give their leaders data that isn't complete. They want to tell a certain story, they want to craft a narrative. They may not want to tell them some hard truths, but the AI doesn't have that bias. It will take it warts and all. And I think there's a real opportunity there to make the leadership team stronger by using data through AI. And I think investors will definitely put that pressure on and actually want decisions being made or at least validated by an AI. So that becomes very exciting.
So that's an interesting take. We generally think that with AI adoption technology coming in, there will be a redundancy in the lower level jobs. But what you are questioning is actually the leadership roles. That's really interesting. So just to bring in a fresh another perspective is, as per one of the researchers that we have done, 65% of Gen Zs today want to be associated with an organization which has a sense of meaning and purpose. So my question is to Jay. Are you as an organization focusing on involving employees in driving the sustainability agenda, which includes a diversity, environment, and social consciousness? And how exactly are you doing it?
Absolutely. And I think in most parts of the world, the diversity conversation, for example, is focused on gender, sometimes LGBTQ+, rarely disability, but no one really talks about generation.
Yeah.
Especially in India, no one really talks about generation. We over-index so much on gender. I'm not saying it's not important, but our workforce is probably changing the most dramatically with the influx of Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, etc. And maybe in a few years, what they call the Gen Alpha will also start coming into our workplace. And people like me from Gen X will still be in the workforce, isn't it? So you're thinking about 5 generations. Yeah. And to go back to your question, I think the priorities of the Gen Z and the future generations is very different to what my generation would have had and some of our generations would have had. And they are definitely looking for organizations which go beyond profit. Yes, profit is important, but how do you look at purpose and how does purpose drive decisions in the organization is very critical. And at BT, for example, we've got a very powerful purpose, isn't it? We are connecting for good. That's our purpose, the strap line. But more importantly, because we connect people, businesses and communities through our telecommunications and all our solutions which we offer, which is quite a powerful purpose. And we have a very strong ESG focus and agenda because of the legacy we've had as an organization. And today, at BT, we harness that. So BT in India has a very strong focus on social impact. What do we want to do from a society perspective? And something extremely heartening always happens whenever you go for even a simple thing like a volunteering event. You will see the people who are probably the Gen Z are in vast majority, and there are just 1 or 2 of those Gen Xers because they're probably worried about paying home loans and mortgages and everything else, and working like 20 hours a week or 20 hours a day, isn't it? Whereas the Gen Zs are on the forefront because, for example, our social impact program focuses on enabling digital skills in underprivileged girls, okay, which is such a noble task in a country like India, isn't it? Where girls don't have access to education, let alone access to digital education. Okay. So you see that participation quite a lot. In all our employee surveys, people really connect with our purpose and what we do in our inclusion and our social impact efforts. And when you cut it by the cohort of the Gen Z and millennials, which is very easy for us because 91% of our colleagues are either Gen Z or millennial. Right. So we are the outliers, isn't it? The Gen X people. And so we try and leverage that energy through like an employee voice. So we have a group of people who are from that generation who advise the leadership teams around what decisions would be better. Okay. So we've just launched a suite of flexible work options, which has gone down brilliantly well with the Gen Z population, because we are saying, if you work for X number of years with all the caveats, etc., you can take a sabbatical, for example, which our generation might not even think of taking a sabbatical, isn't it? But for Gen Zs, it's probably on par. Yeah, I worked for 2 years,
an incentive
time to take
for
a sabbatical.
That's like an incentive for
That's
them,
like an
right?
incentive.
Yeah.
So organizations need to really reimagine the way you do employee experience with this new generation.
Right. Thank you, Jay. And so my last question to each of the panelists is to transition into the 10x growth future, what will be your one critical talent mantra? So we'll start with Sahana.
I shouldn't have sat next to you. Mistake. Okay. So if you're speaking about 10x, right? To understand from a 10x perspective, one, we are speaking about a 10x mindset that, we need to adopt, right? And also in terms of the question back to the organization is, what is that 10x feature that you have which will which will make you compete with your competitors or the market for you to be successful. I think asking these two questions, one of the talent mantras could be in terms of course, like I spoke earlier, in terms of having location agnostic roles. You can find talent anywhere. You can find global talent based out of India. You can find out of Eastern Europe. So it is not centered across one particular location. I think the time's gone. And the second is each one of us having a continuous learning mindset. That learning mindset, be it work, outside of work, or whatever, keeping your mind engaged and constantly learning. I think this will take us out there, and also having being curious, constantly questioning the what and the how, somewhere will get us out there.
Got it. So you spoke a lot about location agnostic roles. Just wanted to understand for your organization, what would be the typical mix of location agnostic roles and work from office roles? Have you made a distinction as such?
So in terms of, let me put it this way, it's not that we have remote working, right? By location agnostic roles, what we mean out here is you have a position of leadership role. It's not necessary that, the leader has to be hired based out of UK or US. That's not important. If you find the right kind of a leader with the right skills in Bangalore or any other location, the manager has the flexibility, the hiring manager has the flexibility to take a call depending on the location. And of course, what's more important out here is where is the team based? So the team needs to have, there should be a good proportion of leadership versus the team.
Right.
Just having leadership based out of another country and then the team distributed across in other locations doesn't make sense. So our goal is to have equal proportion in leadership and the team.
Got it. So, Vinutha, what would be your critical talent mantra?
See, AI is going to, I think, definitely reshape the technology landscape. Therefore, I think adaptation and long-term learning will become very important. So people have to be more proactive and understand the underlying implications of AI. And also stay relevant with the skills. So if they want to thrive and survive in the environment. I think for me, very simply put, I will say participate in the evolution, adopt, adapt, and I think we need to ride the wave, not fight it.
Got it.
Yeah.
So, Vinutha, could you just give us one or two best practices at Sony, which is helping employees ride this wave and build that, I would say, adaptability, which you talked about?
Yeah, in terms of learning, I think somebody was talking about it. There are abundant of resources. Yeah. I think we try to encourage the change of mindset. Right. I think that is very important. I think in the morning, somebody was talking about will gap and skill gap. So everybody has it, right? We have the resources, but it's just about the will. Now, people can say that, AI is going to come and it's going to do everything. So I can just sit back and relax. I don't need to do anything. So that's the will gap. Now, skill gap is you can actually leverage the potential of AI and do much. You can become the 10x productive a resource, right? I think this is something that we try to encourage our people to do. We try to proactively ask them to, try and upskill in certain upcoming areas, with projects which are still in the planning stage and which are not really shared out there. So we try to, encourage them to kind of get upskilled in those areas. But then, we still are faced with the challenge of, most of the population wanting to be in the exciting areas, and we have still the projects that are to run, right? So there is a kind of this thing between that. Yeah.
So just a follow-up question. Jay talked a lot about Gen X, Gen Z, Gen Y. So do you see a uniformity in the, learnability, or I would say eagerness to learn across all the three generations, or are there distinctions that you observe?
I think they are eager to learn, but one of the challenges, they're very choosy.
Yeah.
Right?
Which generation are you?
Yeah, very choosy. So everybody wants to be doing the next big thing.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a challenge. But I think more than all of that, I think it's just about the attitude to go a bit, ahead and try to do things. Today, we are not in an age where we started our careers, right? When we started our careers, resources were very scarce. There were managers, a few of them who used to hold on to information, and that was power. So you really needed to keep a day aside to go to the library and refer to some books and all of that. Today, that is not the case. So there is nobody who's going to come and spend that time and sit with you. Of course, we are supposed to do it, but during the day-to-day stresses of your delivery and outcomes and all of that, I think it's very difficult. I think a lot of it has to come from within.
Yeah.
So that is the expectation.
Yeah.
Right? It's not only, tomorrow if AI is going to take away the jobs, as many of them are saying, I think it becomes a very personal question to me on what is it that I am going to do.
Right.
Right? It's not, my company is not going to tell me, hey, you need to do this or that.
Right.
You know your inherent skills. You know the skills which you are, very good at, which everybody is able to see. But I think that is very important.
Got it. So Sam, what will be your critical mantra?
For me, it's definitely that the future of talent is increasingly agile. I'm very conscious there's a lot of tech leaders as well. So I don't mean agile as in there'll be no software development done waterfall anymore. Agile as in like the speed, the haste, the impact that people have. I think there's still sometimes a lot of bias looking at candidates that you're going to hire. Oh, that person's been 6 months there, 12 months there. They're not committed. That's a problem. When really that might be the most impactful employee. We talked about learning agility and the ability to adapt very, very quickly. You get that from those kind of employees, and you get that like different generations coming through. There's not the perception of I'm going to have a job for life. I'm going to join from university. I'm going to climb the ladder. I'm going to retire, and that's it. People want to move around, experience new things, get that learning agility. So I think having that approach and adapting talent practices and processes around that concept will help businesses be even more successful. And that's something you have to educate. You have hiring managers that are making these decisions, and they need to be made aware that assess for impact, assess for potential, assess for capability. Don't assess for, they've done that job for 5 years in their current company, so they're probably the best match. That doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. So just a follow-up question. So are you pushing employees to build that agility, or you see that naturally coming to employees these days? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think we're doing good work in encouraging that agility. And
how are you doing it? If you can just...
Yeah, so I think that's more the learning development, the HR teams, talent development that are, I think, being more proactive in giving people opportunities and telling them what that looks like.
Right.
From a recruiting perspective, our talent acquisition group has been fantastic in actually prioritizing internal talent, having these conversations. To my point earlier, you really don't want a competitor speaking to your employees about an opportunity when you've got that role yourself.
Right.
We should be speaking to them first. And that's what the talent acquisition team are very good at talking about: next steps, development, internal mobility. And we've started to look at data around that and really see where we can optimize and improve that, because internal hiring should always be the priority. And that helps to instill that culture of let's get to the next level, let's progress people, let's get people developing just by that activity.
Got it. So, Jay, what would be your critical talent mantra?
I think two things. One is, I'll go back to what the Southwest Airlines book, Nuts. They used that line where they said, hire for attitude, train for skill. Okay. I think that's going to be the golden thread for the future, isn't it? Because you got to bring in people who have that ability to learn, collaborate, work in teams, fail fast, etc. Skills can be taught, isn't it? So that's what will happen. And I think the second most important thing which organizations need to do, but leaders struggle with, like Sam mentioned, even people at the top will need to reshape their thinking, is how much of risk tolerance do you have? Because the new generation, as they come in, when they're trying to experiment things, they will break things, isn't it? So how does the organization tolerate that failures, and what do you learn from there and go on will become very important.
Thanks, Jay. So I would like to open the floor to the audience for any questions. Yeah, please go ahead. Can somebody please pass on the mic?
I hope I'm audible.
Yeah,
You are.
Great. I'd like to build further on the topic of cross-generational workforce.
Sure.
Now, as on today, most organizations have at least 3 generations. There are some organizations which have 4 generations.
Right.
And we are talking about in future 6 generations workforce.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right? Something that you just asked the panelists about, what is the learning agility, for instance, across generations? In my experience, I've seen a big shift, big change in cross-generational learning agility.
Right.
The Gen X's, most of them are so comfortable in their jobs, are so happy with what they're doing, they don't see a need to learn anymore. They don't see a need to change into anybody else. Whereas the Gen Zs and millennials are the ones who are curious. Now, even between the Gen Zs and millennials, there's a big difference in terms of the way they look at the,
Right.
not just the learning thing, their outlook to life, their outlook to the work, need for autonomy and things like that. So a relevant question here is around the culture. We as HR leaders are part owners to the culture as well too. Now, given the fact that we are in a time where there is cross-generational workforce, what are we doing to bring in a culture that aligns well with differential workforce, with different sets of mindsets and expectations?
Okay. Yeah.
I can go first? Okay. So I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
I'm sorry. I'm Captain Krishna.
So in terms of your question, I would differ a little bit, right? If you look at Gen X too, I think the learning capability has always been there. If you look at, how do I say, let's go let's not go a couple of decades. We are not so old. Let's go a decade or 2 back, all right? Technology did change. And if you look at it, most of us have had a learning curve every 4 years where we've always revisited. And it's the same for engineering folks too. They have constantly learned and revisited it, right? So that is one aspect of it, that learning as a concept is something that across generation is a constant. That's an approach that I would look at, and the ones who will survive going forward are the ones who are open to learning. And each of these generations have their strengths that they get onto the table. And how much could you, learn across and get the best practices there? I think that works in your favor. And the second piece out here is in terms of I really don't think organizations are responsible for learning, or, your people manager or HR is. You as a person should be committed to learning, irrespective of which generation are you in. You want to be part of you want to work, you want to learn on new technologies, it's your responsibility. Just go and learn, No one's responsible for your career. No one's responsible for anything. You are responsible. So I think that's the constant. The only thing between generation is, yes, there's something for us to learn from each of them rather than criticizing any of those generations. So yeah.
So just to add to what Sahana said, the only thing which I would like to add is, how do you leverage the expertise of the different generations is important. The Gen X probably are deep specialists, isn't it? So how do you use that specialism knowledge to impart skills, hard skills, to the new generation, while leveraging the ability to experiment, curiosity, etc., which is abundant in the new generation? And that could be a great combination. But it's always a bit of a challenge, because most of the decision makers, at least in large multinational conglomerates, are Gen X, sometimes even baby boomers, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there is a bit of survival tactics as well. Yeah. So how does organizations cut through that and give those opportunities for people is very, very critical. And that's where, almost having shadow leadership teams with Gen Zs and millennials could be quite helpful for organizations to make the right kind of decisions and investments.
Yeah, please. The mic, please. Yeah.
Hi. My question is for Jay, actually. So you mentioned about hired for attitude, and Train for skill. Yeah. So in this generation, like everybody has been talking about how volatile and how unpredictable this current generation is, because some might work for 6 months, some might work for 1 year.
Yeah.
So especially in the tech industry and also in the the deep tech and the AI, how do you strike a balance between the ever-changing workforce? Like it can happen that one person whom you have trained for a year or 2 years, especially like I said, the deep tech or the semicon industries, you are training and then the machines are so expensive and you train this particular youngsters for around 2 years and all of a sudden they decide, no, I don't want to work here, or they just move on. So how do you strike a balance here between the skill and the attitude and the business purpose or the the profitability of the business?
Absolutely, especially in, like you say, deep tech industries or anything which involves time to learn to become productive. I think there is probably a fallacy that the Gen Zs are like floating butterflies, isn't it? They probably are not. There is a lot of these fallacies, isn't it? One of the fallacies is that all they want is, am I creating impact? Am I working towards a clear purpose? If the organization is able to give them opportunities, even while they are learning, to create impact, they're not going to wait for 5 years to create impact and develop this product, isn't it? They would want to do something in 6 months. It could be even a small thing. So how does the organization design the work is very, very important. And then how does the organization reward contribution becomes very important. And then what are the different elements of employee experience which talks to them, like, I just don't want to be learning. Can I get opportunities to get involved in some real life projects as well, would keep them longer. I would say if you have a highly capable, smart, like Sahana said, when you hire from top universities, etc., somebody, even for 3 years, I think their impact will definitely give you a better ROI than somebody who's been there for 5-6 years and kind of being a slightly slow learner. So think about impact, think about value, what they're adding, and think about the employee experience which talks to their needs rather than what you think is the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Soumya, and I think this question might be to Sam because he was talking about how do you about the skills, how you identify it in your teams. The question is, if you don't have tools in your in an organization to measure skill levels, what do you depend upon? Do you depend upon self-rating, manager rating, or are there any other options that you can depend upon?
Yeah, so I think the best way to go about it is obviously building a clear skills taxonomy. And that doesn't have to be as detailed as, Python, R, things like that. You can start at a very kind of top level that matches with your job taxonomy at the moment to build your way down. In terms of ratings, that can get very tricky. Obviously, one thing that I was speaking to a tech leader who implemented a skills process within their technical organization, and suddenly so many people were highly proficient in AI. They weren't, but they thought they were, and they thought, if I put that down, I'll get those opportunities in those projects, so I'll do that. So you have to be careful around how you're motivating that. One thing that I've seen being very effective that a lot of tech companies have done is self-rating, yes, but then also peer rating and manager rating. And the manager rating tends to get an overriding weightage on that. So maybe that stands for 70% of the overall ranking for that skill. Their peers a bit smaller, the individual's self-rating a little bit low, but it contributes. So that's one process you can start to use. As well, you can start to look at the different data sources you have on individuals. A lot of HRIS systems, if you're with Workday, SuccessFactors, etc., you probably have a good snapshot of that person when you hired them. The CV gets put into the HRIS system and then gathers dust, doesn't get updated. Yeah. So your experience of that person's skills, unless you hired them a week ago, 2 weeks ago, has started to degrade. Like data quality is less and less. So a lot of companies now, and you'll see it through these HRIS systems that are doing a lot more AI development work, will go, yes, let's look at the LinkedIn profile. Yes, let's, with their permission, of course, and actually get a holistic skills picture of this individual. And then you can do skills inferences. Someone who is a machine learning engineer, very, very experienced in data science, if they don't list it, they're probably good at statistical analysis as well and mathematics and these sorts of skills. So you can infer skills as well and then show that to the individual. Do you agree? Do you have this skill? And they can go, yes, great. And then suddenly you get this rich view on the skills of that individual, rather than just when you've got a moment, would you mind popping on and just filling in this form, telling us what skills you have? So you have to be a bit more cognizant of checking the data, making sure that you're not having people just self-proclaiming that they are the biggest expert in the company on whatever trending topic is at the time.
Thank you. But it's very hard to get the managers to rate,
Managers are always a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a question at the back. Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Vijay Anand. My query is about when we are trying to bring a transformation for a next generation. What about for existing generation or like middle level managers? How we are going to transform? What kind of challenges you are seeing from your experience? What techniques you have adopted? What you are trying to do within your own organization? I would like to know. Thank you.
Would like to take up, Vinutha?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about the older generations, I think they have to do a lot by themselves because they have enough experience. They have to be aware of what is happening outside, right? But having said that, I think we have to probably educate them, make them aware of how the workforce is changing across the years, the expectations, the kind of leadership that they're looking at. Not easy because it's very nice to sit here and say all of that because all of us are aware of what has to be done and what should not be done. But I think at the workplace, it becomes very difficult. But I think we have to constantly keep focusing on that. I think after a point in time, it's better if HR takes a back step and, let the managers be the HR for their respective teams. I think that is when they kind of get an experience of it should not be, even today it happens, right? Every time there's a challenge, people challenge that happens, they say, please go and talk to HR. So that is not the expectation anymore. All the managers are HR managers for their particular business teams. I think we have to somehow reach that point where HR really takes a backseat. For example, the employee sat surveys, etc. Right? It should not be an initiative that is driven by HR. It is not owned by HR. The ownership is with the managers. I think if you involve them in all of those processes and when they see the metrics that they are seeing for their relevant teams, they understand what is happening within their teams. I think that will probably, kind of trigger them to take actions to correct those.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Hi, good evening to everybody. Firstly, thank you. Some great insights from all of you on the panel. My name is Anita. I just want to quickly understand from any of you up there. We're at a very different talent landscaping zone currently, right? What are your struggles? I'm sure you've all faced them. Struggles with first-time managers, especially on the emotional quotient part of it, because it's a struggle, and I'm sure everyone in this room would agree that it's a desperate struggle for help. Your EQ is something that especially with this new Gen AI, that everything that we want to bring on board. How do you deal with issues when it comes to the emotional part, especially for first-time managers? Any lights there, please? Thank you.
I can potentially jump in. I think this has been a problem for a long time. Where this goes wrong in organizations is where they don't provide a safe space to step back. Not everyone wants to be a manager. Not everyone is good at being a manager. A lot of people think they want to be a manager because it's progress and it's going up the ladder and it's all very exciting. And then you land in a role where you're looking after people and dealing with emotions and dealing with kind of individual personalities and conflict. And I think if you don't give that person the ability to step back, they will either remain as a bad manager for a long time and cause problems, or they will just select themselves out of the business. So I think giving that safe space to say, great, let's go for promotion, let's give you the opportunity, but actually completely okay if it's not good for you. Give them that safe space, give them mentoring, give them coaching. And actually, we talk about fear of failure, allow them to come to you and tell them, I failed in this, I don't want to be a manager. Actually, it's not what I thought it was. I'm spending all this time, talking to people about problems. I just want to do good work. So I think that's the solution that most companies should go for. It's a very challenging thing to do, though, and to put into practice.
So thanks a lot, audience, for the wonderful questions. I'll just summarize the key takeaways for the session. So we heard that the strength of the future talent stack will be rooted in the diverse skill sets of generalists, although specialists will continue to reign, and the expectation will be to manage a multi-generational workforce. There will be a likely shift of preference from long-term employment to project-based employment, increasing focus on soft skills, including learning agility, resilience, critical thinking, and emotional intelligence. And it is true that there will be job redundancies, but the future is more about creating alternate career pathways. So keep learning, keep growing, and thanks a lot for being a part of this session. Thank you so much, panelists.